January 2026, the Arctic Circle. A Danish naval vessel patrols waters that were solid ice 20 years ago. 300 miles to the east, a Chinese research ship conducts what Beijing calls scientific surveys. 90 miles to the west, American F-35s rotate through Patuxent Space Base, the installation once called Thule, scanning horizons that no longer freeze. In Nuuk, Greenland's capital, the parliament debates a mining contract that will determine whether Chinese or American corporations extract the rare earth elements buried beneath the melting permafrost. The Danish prime minister watches from Copenhagen, 6 hours away by plane, holding a telephone that connects her to allies who are no longer asking permission. They are issuing warnings. This is not a negotiation. This is an auction conducted under the pretense of diplomacy, and the item being sold is an island the size of Western Europe that officially belongs to no bidder in the room. To understand why the United States wants Greenland, you must first abandon the map you were taught in school. Flatten the Earth, and Greenland appears remote, a frozen afterthought suspended above Canada, relevant to no one, threatening nothing. But the Earth is not flat. It is a sphere. And on a sphere, Greenland is not peripheral. It is central. Draw a line from Washington to Moscow. It crosses Greenland. Draw a line from New York to Beijing. It passes over the Arctic. Draw the trajectory of any intercontinental ballistic missile launched from Russia toward North America. It descends over Greenland's ice sheet. The island is not beside the great power competition. It is above it, geometrically positioned at the apex of the northern hemisphere, where every strategic calculation converges. For most of human history, this position was worthless. Ice locked the Arctic. The polar route existed on maps, but not in reality. Ships could not sail it. Planes could not reliably fly it. Missiles did not yet exist. Greenland's geography was theoretical, a curiosity for cartographers, irrelevant to the admirals and generals who planned for wars fought in temperate waters. The Cold War changed the theory into practice. When the Soviet Union tested its first atomic bomb in 1949, American strategists recognized that the next war would come over the pole. Bombers would not cross the Atlantic, they would cross the Arctic. Defense required detection. Detection required radar, and radar required installations positioned along the flight path of Soviet aircraft. Greenland became essential overnight. The United States had maintained bases there since World War II, when the German occupation of Denmark created a legal vacuum that Washington filled with troops. After the war, those bases remained. In 1951, a formal defense agreement granted America rights to operate military installations on Danish territory. Thule Air Base, constructed at the 76th parallel, became the northern anchor of the distant early warning line, the chain of radar stations that would provide minutes of notice before nuclear annihilation. The base was built on land inhabited by the Inuit people who had lived in the region for generations. They were given 4 days to leave. Danish and American officials informed them that their homes, their hunting grounds, their ancestral territory were now required for the defense of the free world. They were relocated to Quannock, a settlement 70 miles north, where conditions were harsher and survival more precarious. No treaty was negotiated with the Inuit. No compensation was offered. The decision was made in Copenhagen and Washington. The consequences were born in the Arctic. This is how strategic territory is secured, not through purchase, through presence, not through consent, through necessity. For 4 decades, Thule served its purpose. Radar scanned the skies. Nuclear weapons sat in bunkers. Satellites were tracked. Communications were monitored. The base was a fixed point in the architecture of mutually assured destruction, valuable precisely because geography cannot be moved. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, analysts predicted the Arctic would lose its strategic significance. They were wrong. The Arctic did not become irrelevant. It became contested. The ice began to retreat. Satellite imagery documented the acceleration. Sea routes that had been theoretical became navigable. The northern sea route along Russia's coast could shave weeks off shipping times between Europe and Asia. The Northwest Passage through Canada opened for summer transit. The Central Arctic Ocean, that frozen barrier between continents, began to melt into an ocean that could be crossed, exploited, and militarized. Russia moved first. Moscow rebuilt Soviet-era bases along its northern coastline, deployed new icebreakers, established Arctic military commands, and tested weapon systems designed for polar operations. China followed, declaring itself a near-Arctic state in a 2018 policy document that claimed Beijing had rights and interests in a region located nearly 1,000 miles from Chinese territory. The justification was economic. The implications were strategic. China began investing in Arctic infrastructure, scientific research, and diplomatic relationships with every nation that bordered the melting sea. Greenland became the prize neither power could ignore and neither power could claim. The island holds what the 21st century requires. Beneath the ice sheet, geologists have identified deposits of rare earth elements, the 17 metals essential to every technology that defines modern civilization. Neodymium for the magnets in electric vehicles, dysprosium for wind turbines. terbium for screens, europium for fiber optics. These elements exist elsewhere, but nowhere in concentrations that approach Greenland's potential. China recognized this decades before Western governments understood the vulnerability they were creating. Beijing's state-owned enterprises acquired mines across the globe, built refineries, accepted environmental costs that democracies refused to impose, and established a near monopoly on rare earth processing. By the mid-2020s, China controlled the vast majority of the world's rare earth supply chain. This is not market dominance, it is strategic leverage. When one nation controls the materials required for advanced manufacturing, that nation holds veto power over the industrial capacity of every competitor. The United States discovered its dependency through crisis. Trade disputes revealed how easily Beijing could restrict exports. Defense audits exposed how many weapon systems relied on Chinese processed materials. Intelligence assessments warned of supply chain choke points that could be severed in conflict. America needed an alternative source of rare earths. The alternatives were limited, and the largest untapped reserve sat beneath an island owned by a NATO ally that could not develop them alone. Greenland's economy tells the hidden story that explains everything. The island has a population of approximately 57,000 people, fewer than most mid-sized American towns. Its economy depends almost entirely on fishing, which accounts for over 90% of exports. The public sector employs roughly half the workforce. Infrastructure is minimal, healthcare stretched, education dependent on sending students abroad. The government operates on an annual block grant from Denmark worth approximately $500 million, a transfer that constitutes nearly half of public revenue. Greenland has the legal authority to declare independence. The 2009 Self-Government Act established a framework for full sovereignty whenever Greenlanders choose to claim it. But independence requires economic viability. And economic viability requires revenue that does not currently exist. The minerals in the ground are worth trillions. The treasury above ground runs deficits. This gap between potential wealth and present poverty is not a paradox. It is a trap. Developing those minerals requires capital, technology, and expertise that Greenland does not possess. Attracting investment requires opening doors to foreign powers, each of which arrives with strategic interests that extend beyond profit margins. China offered financing for airport construction. Denmark blocked the deals and provided alternative funding. America offered security partnerships that came with expectations about who would be excluded. The European Union proposed regulatory frameworks that served continental interests. Everyone offered something, no one offered independence. The 2019 proposal was theater designed to establish terms. When the American president publicly declared interest in purchasing Greenland, the international response was predictable outrage. Denmark called the idea absurd. Greenlandic officials expressed offense. Editorial boards ridiculed the suggestion, but ridicule is not refusal. And the proposal, however clumsily delivered, served a purpose that outlasted the news cycle. It signaled to Beijing that Washington was willing to escalate. It reminded Copenhagen that America considered Greenland a strategic asset regardless of sovereignty claims. It informed Nuuk that economic partnership with the United States would come with geopolitical expectations. The consulate that opened in Greenland's capital was the real move. The investment initiatives were the real move. The quiet expansion of American presence, contract by contract, project by project, was the objective the headline was designed to obscure. You do not purchase territory in the 21st century, you finance it. You build dependencies that function like ownership without requiring treaties or flags. You ensure that airports are constructed with your money, ports are expanded by your engineers, mining rights are negotiated with your corporations. Sovereignty remains nominal, influence becomes structural, and the small nation sitting atop resources the world requires discovers that its choices were always bounded by needs it cannot meet alone. The competition is no longer hidden. American investment in Greenland has accelerated since 2020. Military installations have been upgraded and renamed to reflect their expanded mission. Economic development programs target infrastructure that serves strategic as much as civilian purposes. Diplomatic engagement has intensified with high-level visits and public commitments that would have seemed excessive for an autonomous territory of 57,000 people a decade ago. China has not retreated. Beijing's scientific expeditions continue. Investment proposals persist. Diplomatic pressure on Copenhagen tests alliance commitments that were forged for different threats in different eras. Russia watches from across the Arctic, building capabilities, probing defenses, demonstrating that the melting north is contested space, where multiple powers will operate regardless of lines drawn on maps. Denmark remains caught between commitments it cannot abandon and costs it cannot indefinitely bear. The block grant to Greenland represents a substantial transfer from Danish taxpayers to a territory that shows no economic path towards self-sufficiency without mineral extraction. But mineral extraction invites foreign involvement. Foreign involvement compromises Danish authority. And Danish authority is the only reason Greenland has not already become a direct arena for great power competition. The Greenlandic people watch from the margins of decisions that will determine their future. They did not choose to sit atop rare earth deposits. They did not melt the ice that is revealing resources they lack the capacity to extract. They did not position their homeland at the geographic center of rivalries between nuclear powers. They inherited an island, and the inheritance has become a burden that grows heavier as the world grows more desperate for what lies beneath their feet. Independence would require replacing Danish subsidies with alternative revenue. The only alternative revenue comes from minerals. Mineral development requires foreign partners. Foreign partners arrive with strategic agendas that will shape Greenlandic politics, economics, and sovereignty for generations. The choice is not between freedom and dependency. It is between dependencies, between patrons, between futures designed in Washington or Beijing or Copenhagen by planners who have never seen the northern lights over Disco Bay. This is the arithmetic of strategic geography in an age of resource competition and great power rivalry. Greenland will not be sold. The transaction would be too visible, too offensive, too reminiscent of an imperial era that modern rhetoric pretends to have transcended. But Greenland is being acquired in increments too gradual to provoke resistance, through contracts too technical to inspire protest, by powers too patient to demand what they can simply wait to receive. The ice melts, the minerals emerge, the competition intensifies, and an island that wished only to govern itself learns what every strategic territory has learned across centuries of great power politics: that geography is destiny, that resources are curses disguised as blessings, and that the nations positioned at the crossroads of empire never choose their fate. They inherit it, they endure it, and eventually they are absorbed by it, not through conquest, but through the quieter violence of investment, dependency, and need. The coldest land on earth is being claimed by the warmest of intentions, and the price of being necessary is never belonging entirely to yourself.